Qin Shi gets the reputation. The Wall, the Terracotta Army, the unification of China by force. He's the name everyone reaches for when the question is which Chinese emperor was the cruelest. But here's the thing. He died in bed. The empire he built survived him by about 4 months, and the man who burned it to the ground was his own son. Across more than 2,000 years of imperial history, 13 dynasties produced 13 rulers whose names should probably make people flinch more than they do. Some were monsters. Some were catastrophes wearing a crown. A few were both. This is every one of them. The son who lost everything in 3 years, Qin Er Shi inherited the first unified Chinese empire at roughly 20 years old, and within about 3 years, he had nothing left to inherit. The eunuch Zhao Gao ran him like a puppet. At least 12 of his own brothers were executed in the marketplace, with Sima Qian's Shiji suggesting the sibling death toll may have been higher still. He doubled the forced labor quotas on a population already broken from building his father's tomb complex, a project that drew on an estimated 700,000 conscripted workers. Zhao Gao's grip was so absolute that when the eunuch pointed at a deer in open court and called it a horse, officials who corrected him simply disappeared. By the time rebellion swept the empire, every general capable of stopping it had already been purged. Zhao Gao forced him to commit suicide in 207 BC. He was around 23. His father's dynasty outlived him by 4 months, 54 years, and 1 unforgivable year. Emperor Wu of Han ruled for 54 years and sits in most rankings near the top of Chinese imperial greatness, which makes 91 BC harder to defend. The Gangu persecution began with accusations of witchcraft directed at the emperor and metastasized into a wave of executions that Han records say killed tens of thousands across the capital. His own crown prince, Liu Ju, was accused of orchestrating the rituals. Knowing what was coming, Liu Ju raised a desperate armed uprising inside Chang'an itself, failed, and died. Emperor Wu later acknowledged the accusations had been fabricated. He reversed none of the executions. His endless campaigns against the Xiongnu drained the treasury and the population at the same time, and contemporary records describe catastrophic demographic decline by the end of his reign. On his deathbed, he issued the Luntai Edict, a rare imperial admission of wrongdoing, one of the only times a Chinese emperor ever said the words in writing. The admission is famous. The dead were still dead, the reformer who killed millions. Wang Mang usurped the Han throne in 9 AD, and sometimes gets described by modern historians as a visionary ahead of his time. That framing works only if you skip the part about the millions of corpses. He abolished private land ownership overnight, which meant farmers suddenly had no legal basis to work the fields their families had worked for generations, and agriculture collapsed on impact. He reformed the currency so many times in such quick succession. Some accounts suggest multiple changes inside a single year, that commerce became functionally impossible and ordinary savings vanished. Then, in 11 AD, the Yellow River broke its banks, in part because he had neglected its infrastructure, and the resulting famine lit the fuse on the Red Eyebrow Rebellion. When the rebels reached his palace, he was reportedly still inside performing ritual ceremonies. A mob killed him in 23 AD. The Hohan Shu records that his head was displayed publicly for years afterward and reportedly used as a drinking vessel. Whether that last detail is true or not, no one at the time seems to have objected. The poet who filled a river with bodies. Cao Cao never formally called himself emperor. The Wei dynasty he founded gave him the posthumous title Emperor Wu of Wei, which qualifies him by anyone's honest count. He was also a gifted poet, a brilliant strategist, and an efficient administrator, which is what makes the Shu province massacre of 193 AD impossible to file under ordinary wartime brutality. According to the Sangguoji, his forces killed hundreds of thousands of civilians in revenge for the murder of his father, with bodies reportedly choking the Sai River. He also executed Kong Rong, a direct descendant of Confucius and one of the most respected literary figures of the age, along with Kong Rong's entire family, young children included. The line most associated with him, roughly, "I would rather betray the world than let the world betray me," is widely attributed to him, though its precise origin in primary texts is debated. The poetry was genuinely good. That's what makes it worse: the accidental catastrophe. Emperor Hui of Jin is the only figure on this list whose evil was almost entirely passive. By most accounts in the historical record, he was severely intellectually disabled and incapable of governing in any meaningful sense. When told that peasants were starving because they had no rice, he reportedly asked, according to the Jinshu, why they didn't just eat meat porridge instead. A line that predates Marie Antoinette's alleged cake remark by more than 1,000 years. His incapacity handed real power to a rotating cast of relatives and set off the War of the Eight Princes, a 16-year civil war fought entirely over who got to control this one helpless man. Military deaths exceeded 500,000. The accompanying famines likely killed millions. He was captured, lost, and recaptured by different factions, moved between armies like furniture. His reign opened the door to the uprising of the Five Barbarians and the permanent fragmentation of northern China. He died in 307 AD, possibly poisoned. The empire died with him in everything but name. The first state religious purge. Emperor Taiwu of Northern Wei, personal name Tuoba Tao, unified northern China after the chaos of the 16 Kingdoms period, and then did something no previous Chinese ruler had attempted: a systematic state campaign to wipe out an entire religion. In 446 AD, after weapons and alcohol were reportedly discovered in a Buddhist monastery, he issued edicts ordering every monastery in the empire destroyed, every scripture burned, every monk killed. The Weishu records the scale as enormous, with tens of thousands of monks reportedly executed, though the Buddhist sources that preserved the story had clear reasons to emphasize its severity, and the weapons discovery may have been a genuine find or a convenient pretext. His military campaigns against the Xiongnu and Rouran confederacies were described in contemporary sources as leaving whole regions effectively empty of people. He was assassinated in 452 AD by his own eunuch, who then murdered the next emperor too, before finally being executed himself. Even his death arrived with a sequel. The canal, built on bones. Emperor Yang of Sui may have killed more people as a percentage of China's population than almost any other ruler in recorded history. And he did it while overseeing one of the most impressive infrastructure projects the ancient world ever produced. The Grand Canal, finished around 610 AD, drew on an estimated 5 to 6 million conscripted workers, with death rates among them that both the Suishu and the Ziji Tongjian describe as catastrophic. He then launched 3 consecutive invasions of Goguryeo between 612 and 614 AD. The first mobilized over 1 million men and ended in a defeat so total that reports suggest more than 300,000 never came home. He allegedly murdered his own father, Emperor Wen, to take the throne in 604 AD, though the claim survives mostly in Tang sources with obvious reasons to smear their predecessors, so treat it as probable rather than certain. By 618 AD, the empire was in open rebellion, and Emperor Yang was feasting in Jiangdu, refusing to go north. His own bodyguard captain strangled him. The Tang Dynasty that replaced him inherited a country that needed a generation to recover. The Golden Age that ended in 40 million graves. Emperor Xuanzong's first 4 decades on the throne produced the High Tang, arguably the peak of Chinese civilization, a golden era of poetry, trade, and cultural confidence. Then he fell in love with Yang Guifei. He withdrew from governance. He promoted her relatives into positions they had no business holding. He ignored repeated warnings about a frontier general named An Lushan, who was quietly accumulating dangerous power in the north. When Anlushan rebelled in 755 AD, it triggered one of the deadliest civil wars in human history. Tang census data from the Tang Shu shows the registered population dropping by roughly 2/3 between 755 and 763 AD, with historian estimates of total deaths ranging from 13 to 36 million. Though the methodology behind those figures remains debated, Xuanzong fled Chang'an as the rebels closed in. His own guards mutinied at Mawei Station and strangled Yang Guifei in front of him, blaming her for everything. He returned to the capital a broken man, abdicated to his son, and spent his remaining years under effective house arrest. He reportedly kept a portrait of her and looked at it often. As many as 40 million people may have died. He looked at the portrait. If you're still here, hit the like button. The back half of this list is where it gets worse. The warrior who hired actors to run the empire, Emperor Zhuangzong of later Tang, personal name Li Kengchu, is a case study in a man perfectly built for war and catastrophically unsuited for anything after it. He unified northern China through genuine military brilliance, and then celebrated by handing the actual business of government to eunuchs and theatrical performers, while legitimate officials were humiliated, sidelined, or driven out. He taxed an already shattered population heavily to pay for personal entertainment. In 926 AD, barely 3 years into his reign, a military mutiny ignited. He personally led a countercharge with a handful of men, was struck by an arrow, and died. According to the Qin Er Shi, his own performers piled his body with theatrical instruments and burned it as an improvised pyre. He had ruled for roughly 926 days. The later Tang limped on for a few more years without him, then collapsed too. He conquered an empire and spent it on theater tickets. The artist who lost half of China, Emperor Huizong of Song, is one of the finest artists in Chinese imperial history. His calligraphy style, called slender gold, is still studied today. He assembled the largest imperial art collection China had ever seen. He also lost to northern China, his throne, his son, roughly 14,000 members of his court, and his own freedom, all in a single catastrophe he had spent decades arranging. The Jingkang incident of 1127 AD saw the Qin Dynasty capture Huizong, his son, Emperor Qinzong, and virtually the entire Song imperial court in a single sweep, marching them north as prisoners while his extravagant garden complexes burned behind them. The alliance conducted on the sea, signed in 1120 AD with the Jin against the Liao, had simply cleared a path south for the Jin once the Liao was gone. Huizong died in Jin captivity in 1135 AD, still writing poetry. The poems survive and are considered beautiful. Northern China did not come back for 150 years. The last Mongol in Beijing, Togon Temür, the last Yuan emperor, reigned from 1333 to 1370 AD and presided over a convergence of disasters so total that it is genuinely difficult to separate what he caused from what simply happened to him. The Yellow River changed course catastrophically in the 1340s, with flooding that killed hundreds of thousands. The conscripted labor pulled in to repair the damage was worked so brutally that it directly lit the fuse on the Red Turban Rebellion of 1351. According to the Yuanxi, the Black Death moved along Mongol trade routes through Yuan China in the same window, with demographic historians estimating that China lost somewhere between 30 and 50% of its population across this era, though establishing pre-plague baselines makes precision nearly impossible. Ming-era sources describe him spending increasing resources on esoteric Tibetan Buddhist rituals during this period, though those sources had obvious reasons to blacken his memory. So handle the detail with care. When Zhu Yuanzhang's rebel forces closed on Beijing in 1368, Togon Temür abandoned the city without serious resistance and rode north into Mongolia. He died there in 1370. He was the first Yuan emperor born in China and the last one to rule it. The man who stopped showing up. The Wanli emperor of the Ming Dynasty, personal name Zhu Yijun, managed something no other emperor in the Chinese record is known to have achieved. He simply stopped coming to work for approximately 28 years. From roughly 1589 onward, he refused to attend court, refused to fill vacant offices, and refused to read or respond to administrative memorials. The Mingxi records entire provinces going without functioning governors because he would not authorize the appointments. The government didn't stop exactly. It just slowly hollowed out from the inside. During this same stretch, he was also financing the three great campaigns between 1592 and 1600, three simultaneous, extraordinarily expensive wars that emptied the treasury. His brilliant first minister, Zhang Zhuzheng, had spent a decade rebuilding. When Zhang died, Wanli stripped his family of all property and, according to the Mingxi, had several of his relatives effectively starved to death. Revenge for the strict discipline of his own childhood. He never met the Manchu threat building in the north. His grandson's dynasty fell to it in 1644, 24 years after Wanli's death. Historians routinely identify his reign as the point where the Ming collapse became structurally inevitable. The censor who burned 3,000 books. The Qianlong Emperor reigned from 1735 to 1796 AD, oversaw the peak of Qing territorial expansion, and sits in Chinese historiography as one of the dynasty's great rulers. He also ran what is likely the most extensive literary censorship operation in human history, the Siku Quanshu Project, running from 1772 to 1793 AD, and sold as a grand compilation of all Chinese literature, was used in parallel to identify, alter, and destroy texts judged politically dangerous, with scholarship estimating that more than 3,000 titles were permanently destroyed or rewritten. His military campaigns in Xinjiang between 1755 and 1758 AD targeted the Dzungar Oirat people with a ferocity that historians, including Peter Perdue, have described as genocide, with estimates of 500,000 to 800,000 deaths, and some sources suggesting roughly 80% of the Dzungar population was eliminated. His absolute personal trust in the official Hessian allowed Hessian to build the largest known corruption network in Qing history. After Qianlong's death, a Jiaqing-era audit valued Hessian's personal wealth at roughly 15 years of imperial tax revenue. In 1793, Qianlong dismissed the Macartney mission, informing King George III that China had no need of foreign goods. The Opium War followed 46 years later. Emperor for 83 days. Yuan Shikai is technically the last person ever to declare himself Emperor of China, holding the title for exactly 83 days across the winter of 1915 and 1916, before every province revolted at once and forced him to take it back. He had spent the preceding years methodically dismantling the republic that had replaced the Qing, dissolving parliament, and having political rivals removed. Song Jiaoren, a prominent Republican politician, was assassinated in March 1913, in a killing that contemporary evidence strongly implicated Yuan's government in, though direct proof was never formally established. Most damaging of all, in 1915, he accepted the majority of Japan's 21 demands, a treaty that would have reduced China to a Japanese protectorate in exchange for Japanese recognition of his imperial title. He rescinded the emperorship in March 1916 under total political collapse and died of kidney failure on June 6, 1916, 3 months later. The warlord era that followed, the fragmentation, the violence, the decades of chaos that set the conditions for everything that came after, is his most durable legacy. He wore an imperial robe for 83 days and left the country worse in every direction. The landing. 13 dynasties, 13 men who had the seal of heaven in their hands and used it to break the thing they were supposed to protect. Some of them were monsters on purpose. Some of them were catastrophes by accident. A few wrote beautiful poetry, while the bodies piled up in the next room. What stays with you, if you read enough of these lives back to back, is how often the evil wasn't theatrical at all. It was paperwork unsigned, appointments not made, a portrait stared at too long. An empire doesn't usually fall because one man roars. It falls because one man stops listening, and the silence goes on for years.